Neo-Brass is the brass wing of our Neo Modern Soloists series, a collection of beautiful and powerful solo instruments, in this case a collection of brass from trumpets to flugelhorns to French horns, trombones, euphoniums and tubas, as well as an ensemble patch that blends all of those things together into one usable ensemble collection for you to sketch ideas out. As you can see from the interface, it's wrapped in our overlay threshold technology, so we can get away from the use of key switches where required, though of course they are still available for those that do require them. Though if you want to get in and just kind of play and have the instrument adapt to how you play on your piano, then the overlay threshold really is the gateway into that. There's a series of kind of bread and butter articulations, from the expressive longs to the marcato, staccato, staccatissimo, something that kind of mirrors across the entire Neo range. But then we get into the kind of instrument specific, more nuanced, extended and experimental techniques like falls for the brasses, or extreme extended rises for the trombones, or shakes on the trumpets, which is just a fantastic way to introduce that kind of very unique to trumpet texture. Then we have things like the comic waps that are just excellent for writing in the style of people like Carl Stalling and kind of getting that animation style vibe going in your writing, which is relatively unique to this collection as well, how it's presented here. Okay, so we've got the trumpet on show here. Let's just go over to the key switching mode so we can hear these individual articulations. We have the broken out piano, mezzo forte and forte to access if we want to. We can switch it just to one for kind of like a performance dynamic, or we can use our velocity to access those different areas of the instrument. There's a beautiful true legato built into this instrument as well. Really lovely, really lyrical. It's really the core of this instrument, those expressive longs. Now the Mikado for something bouncy, short and up-tempo. You can really hear the brightness in the forte really shining through the instrument here. It sounds very powerful in the room. Staccato. Awesome. Staccatissimo. Triple tongues. Falls. In order for this to encapsulate the entire instrument's range, just so you don't fall foul of catching a note that doesn't actually exist, of course, a fall is impossible to do from the very lowest note of any instrument, so we've created a pitch-stretched version that allows you to have something there, just in case you land on that note accidentally in your playing and it's there. But it's just to be aware of course, in the real-life scenario. If you're getting a real player to play this, you'll want to switch to an expressive long for that lowest note, but it's just there. And it sounds pretty cool just for you to use, but going an octave higher is more likely the place to be, or a fifth higher. Which are all true recorded in the room, of course. Okay, flutter tongue. Really growly in the lower end of the instrument. It sounds great. Flutter tongue crescendo. Of course, this is a perfect use here to kind of like build a chord and use this crescendo. Or even a cluster chord. Very cool. Very useful articulation. Shakes. They're so cool. And again, so useful, especially if you're kind of getting into that kind of animation way of styling, or you perhaps want to use it in kind of a jazz context, something that might kind of reminisce a Louis Armstrong kind of phrase towards the end. Comic waps. It's great. That's another one that's stretched across the range to ensure that you don't hit a note and there's just nothing there for you. The central octave is where you want to be if you want to catch something true to life. Awesome. Muted flutter crescendos. That sounds quite jazzy to my ears. It's quite a cool, interesting texture. Again, hit that on a cluster and it'll give interesting results. Okay, onto the Flugelhorn, which is the same setup as the trumpet. We'll get into the key switches. Beautiful. Just that little bit warmer. Just takes off kind of some of the top end in comparison to a trumpet. An interesting use case is just kind of switch that trumpet out for the flugelhorn if you want that warmer, rounder sound, or of course combine the two for a duo ensemble. Staccato. Very lovely sound. Staccatissimo. Triple tongue. Falls. Flutter tongue. Flutter tongue crescendo. And with that cluster chord. Very cool. Shakes. And chatter. This, of course, has been recorded just at a singular pitch, but we've used a pitch stretching method so that you have more options available to you. Playing around the C of the instrument's range, the first octave. Will get you the most true to life. Okay, onto the horn. Probably my favourite legato out of the entire collection. It's just such a sweet sound on a French horn because the reverb kind of really carries and it's got such a body to it as an instrument. It's really beautiful. Of course, we can turn true legato off and then we get that kind of classic French horn ensemble sound here because we're going from a soloist to, you know, maybe 3 or 4 players in your ensemble. Very powerful, very beautiful. Okay, on to Marcato. Lovely. Staccato. Staccatissimo. Triple tongues. Crescendos. Again, really useful if you use that in conjunction with maybe like a cluster chord. Those big ripping sounds to kind of pull you from scene to scene if you're scoring or just trying to add a dramatic moment in a piece. Falls. Awesome. Flutter tongue. Lethal in the lower register. Okay, chatter. really chaotic texture just to kind of throw in a piece to add some ambience or just to add some chaos. You know, it's the world's your oyster with that sound. Onto trombone. Really lovely. Again, we can turn this off and get those kind of like chord textures that you could play with an ensemble of trombones. Dynamic range is just extreme. It's really beautiful. Okay, on to Mikado. Staccato. Of course, you can turn on the fortes here. Excellent. Staccatissimo. Triple tongue. Falls. Flutter tongue. Awesome. Flutter tongue crescendo. Let's try this with our cluster chord. That's very cool. Wow. Powerful. Shakes. Muted comic waps. Great, and these are the same thing. There's kind of an octave of these, but they're used across the entire range, so you don't miss a note or play a note and nothing happens. Okay, onto the muted double waps. Probably quite useful in chord form. Very cool. And now the extreme slides. These are falls and rises. If we play softly. And if we play hard. Awesome texture and very unique to the trombone because we need that kind of sliding scale to be able to move. Okay, onto the euphonium. Really beautiful, really warm, of course, very useful, kind of doubling maybe the tuba an octave up and just taking care of the bass end of the spectrum. The Mikado. Staccato. Staccatissimo. Triple tongue. And chatter. Such a unique, cool texture. Okay, on to the tuba. Of course, its key role is to handle bass management and kind of play those roots and fifths and occasionally a run up to another root. Let's go to Mikado. Staccato. Staccatissimo. Triple tongue. Very cool. Okay, let's take a quick look at the interface before we go off to the ensemble patch. So we have our overlay threshold functionality. Let's move to an instrument with more articulations. So the trumpet, we see our overlay functionality here. We could either use it in key switching mode, which links to our keyboard as well, though we can turn those off so that we don't accidentally trigger them if we're using it as part of an ensemble on our keyboards. So on or off, and those buttons will do nothing, or on, and they'll control the entire instrument. Then in overlaying mode, you can choose your own setup, however you want it to be, across any of the articulations, or you can choose from two of our performance modes. Though if you do your own overlay functionality, or maybe choose performance mode, but perhaps you want more expressive longs there, and perhaps instead of the falls at the top, you want to change it to a staccatissimo at the top, now you can go ahead and save your own snapshot, and you've got your own version of that performance mode all set up and ready to go. We then have our true legato functionality, which of course can be turned off or on to make it polyphonic so we can play more than one note in chords, or to keep it on in true legato, where we then drill down to our adaptive true legato mode, so we can get a slower, slightly more porter articulation as we move between different notes, or we can fix it to fast or slow. With the adaptive modes, there is speed related adaptive modes, which is built to milliseconds, and there is velocity adaptive modes, which is built to the velocity spectrum of 1 to 127. You can be above or below this threshold for a slow transition. This ties very nicely into your overlay thresholds. If you had all the expressive longs just in the top end of your spectrum, how you'd had it set up, you'd probably want to switch gears to have this slow transition happen at the top, so you get those beautiful long transitions. The legato velocity, if you click this, it will basically lock your velocity to the first note you play in a series of legato notes, only releasing the velocity once you've fully released all of the notes, and then the next line of velocity phrasing you play will be linked to the very first note again. Okay, then we move through to our mixer page, where we have our mics that are on offer, which is mid mics left and right, hard pan left and right by default, but you can change that however you want, and then an overhead and a room mic, along with legato and mechanical volume controls here, because the legato is of course a section of the transition that happens very briefly between the notes. You can dial that in or out to taste, and the mechanical sounds are literally the sounds of the keys being pressed, which adds so much realism to these instruments. Of course, unavailable on the trombone because there are no keys to press, but on all valved instruments, they are there on offer. Then a basic effects with a stereo delay and reverb, along with some convolutions on offer, and an EQ section where you can sculpt your sound within the plugin if required. Okay, let's jump through to our ensemble patch then. So the ensemble patch makes use of all of the instruments unique to neo brass, which isn't available in strings or woodwinds, just through the nature of the instruments, is a stacking mode. If this is on, you can stack multiple articulations on top of each other, as opposed to the standard overlay functionality where one instrument and articulation takes one slot. So hit stacking, and it means that when you play in this scenario between 35 and 65, you'll get the expressive longs and the Mikado, just to give an extra beefy brass sound. So let's have a little play here of some chords. Beautiful, and you have that set up however you want to. There is a polyphonic legato going on here, so if you're holding a chord and you play another note, you will get the legato transitions for the instruments that are available to play that note. It's relatively mild within the overall mix, just through the nature of the sheer volume of the instrument, but it is there just to add an additional layer of realism whilst you're perhaps using this as a sketching tool before moving through to doing every instrument individually. Okay, that's been an in-depth look at Neo Brass and all that is new in the version 2 update. Head to insanitysamples.com for more information, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.